Do 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 do. Then we can let everybody in. So, should we sing happy birthday while they're coming in? That'd be fun. How are we doing? Yay, it's looking good. Let me just turn that one off, otherwise, it's going to feed back at us. I've got three monitors, two computers working, and someone's gibbering away in the background. There we go. Right, I think we can start. Let's let everybody in. Do 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 do. Okay, in you come, people. In you come, everybody. Hello, everybody. In you come. In you come. Hello. Make yourselves comfortable. Find a seat. Can you hear it? Can you hear okay? Ah, that beard's getting good, Steve. That's looking fine. Oh, yes. Look at that. Ah, hello. Oh, Simon. Hello. And wife, Mrs. and people. Who else we got? Yay.
There's John as well. Hi, John.
Yes. John. Hello, John. Yay. Excellent.
Jean.
We're a small, friendly bunch tonight, I think. And there's some people watching on YouTube as well. So we are live on YouTube, people. So if you've got something to hide from, then now's the time to hide your camera. And we are recording, but you all look you look pretty good tonight, actually. I reckon, Russell, it's about the sharpest audience we've had for a long, long time. Look at them.
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. Oof. Oh, shucks. So, yeah. Okay, well, we'll get started, shall we? Everything seems to be working. Can you all hear me okay? I presume you can. Just nod enthusiastically. Okay. That's enthusiastic. That's better. That's it. Right. Okay. All right. Well, just to let you know what's happening here, my name's Noel Chidwick. If you don't know me, I am the editor-in-chief of Shoreline of Infinity, science fiction magazine, under the science fictional happenings, like this event Horizon. We normally have live events every month. In the past, we used to do it in the flesh. We'd meet and see and smell people. It's great, but now we're in two dimensions. But it's still pretty good. But tonight we're actually having a special event because we are launching this, which is a pamphlet of Jane Yolen's finest science fiction poems, and it's available today. It's beautifully printed, beautifully written as well, of course. And what we're going to have tonight is Jane reading from it and talking about it, and just having a thoroughly good time with some science fiction poems. So that's what it's all about tonight. And so hope you enjoy yourselves. I'm going to shut up and keep an eye on the technology at the back here, and I'm going to hand over to the professional. So, Russell Jones, please take over the seat.
Hi, everyone. I'm Russell. I'm the poetry editor and deputy editor of Shore Infinity, and it's really great today because we're getting to publish not only our first pamphlet, but actually our first publication by a solo author altogether. So it's kind of two firsts for us. Our first poetry pamphlet from Jane Yolen. The way the night's going to work is I'm going to tell you a little bit about Jane. She's going to do a reading, and then I'm going to chat to her. And after that, you have a chance to ask some of your own questions as well. So whilst you're listening, if you have any questions, then you can put them into the chat. You can type them and send them to everybody, and we'll see them. Or you can sort of wave at us at the end, and we'll pick someone, and we'll let you ask your question, Jane. So I'll introduce Jane first. The next month, Jane Yolen's 400th book will be published in the USA, a picture book called Bear Outside, which is about a little girl who wears a bear outside so that she can be brave and strong, and in the end, take care of the bear as well. So here, if we're counting right, and on Jane's 82nd birthday, if you can believe it, is her 399th book, The Last Robot. Along the way, Jane has won Nebula's World Fantasy Awards. Her writings appeared in Best Fantasy and Horror volumes. She's written basically everything, non-fiction, non-fantasy, SF poetry, novels, 2 cookbooks, 10 music books, a novel in verse called Finding Baba Yaga, and some love stories. And as a kind of sideways jaunt into love, Jane, 15-year widow, was recently remarried, a man that she dated in college almost 65 years ago. And he's eager to come to Scotland and meet everyone, of course. So when she and Peter are allowed back again, we're looking forward to seeing them. And they have, yes, had their vaccinations, or Jane's waiting on her second jab soon. Jane was also the head of the Science Fiction Fantasy Association for 2 years, was a Grand Master of the World Fantasy Association and the Science Fiction Poetry Association. But there is a danger, she adds, in winning awards. The Skylark Award from the Boston Science Fiction Convention set her good Scottish wool coat on fire. But luckily, she wasn't in it at the time. I realized, Jane, actually, I was checking today, the first time we met was in August 2016. It was at our 10th Event Horizon in a pub called the Blind Poet. I don't know if you remember it or not. And we had some American students over and you kind of performed alongside them. And it was kind of a dream for them, I think. So it's almost our 5-year anniversary. That was Event Horizon number 10, and this is around number 70 now. So we've done 60 events since then, and we've published Jane several times. And Jane, I'm sure you remember that when I introduce people, I do a joke. So of course, I have to have a robot joke. So how do robots eat guacamole? With microchips.
Oh.
Enjoy. So what is this pamphlet? Well, The Last Robot is poems about Earth, outer space, aliens, and robots. And they're outward looking to the future and other planets, but they're also inward looking at our human needs and also our shortcomings as well. Jane's poems, I feel, are like really approachable and inviting to readers, even maybe readers who don't read a lot of poetry. And they're identifiably Jane Yolen. They've got Jane's voice in them, and they carry a real emotional heft. And as I said, this is Shoreline's first pamphlet and our first solo author publication. So Jane is a great start for us. So now we're going to watch a very brief video, and then I'm going to pass over to Jane.
He was a good king, Arthur. Or maybe it was Holgar the Dane. He'd ridden for both. They were not like some autocrats who used women like snot rags, charging their knights to sleep at the palace, pocketing the small change. But this hanging around in the basement of Camelot or Kronborg Castle, dozing for eternity until the world needs them again, makes no sense when they'd already slept through the torching of Jerusalem, a dozen world wars, the fall of Notre Dame, and the Inquisition. It's bedtime, past actually, and the knight closes his rheumy eyes, his mount heavy in armour, who was once heavy in amour, seeding colts of the 5 kingdoms, is now but skin and bones. He is an undistinguished warhorse, an old family retainer who has been asleep for hours, years, millennia. Another war is before them, behind, the dragon slain of sleeping. The last princess in her tower has already slid down her own long hair. Now she's writing her memoirs, thinking of calling it Hair Today, Gone Tomorrow, posting it for her Patreon followers, breaking the Twitterverse, something the night will never understand. The knight uses night as an excuse, not because he is tired, but because he is retired, with little to do but mount up each morning, each evening. Either he or the horse will die on their feet first. Both together, he hopes. That would make the perfect ever after.
Thank you. So that poem was by Jane, but the illustration was by Elizabeth Delemba, and the music was by Atsu Muramatsu. We'll see another one of those a little later, but for now, I'm just going to pass you over to Jane.
It's interesting to see that one again. I'd almost forgotten. I write a poem a day and send them out to over 1,000 subscribers, and that one was a number of years ago, and to hear it, not only the words, but the picture, which I adore, and the music, which sounds like a slumber party or a grumbling dragon, just works for me. And it's wonderful when something that you've written goes and takes on another form or format. It changes it. It engages and enlarges in different ways. It's quite striking. And thank you for putting that together. First time I heard the cellist, I remember I told you how much I loved what he did. Just very odd, wonderful stuff. And gosh, that just, for me, makes me think about the poem in a different way, almost as if I had never written it, but someone else had, and I'm thinking about it. So to get to The Last Robot, again, a thank you. I remember when you contacted me and said, would you, well, first you turned down some poems of mine. Then you said, but we want to do a pamphlet and a series of pamphlets, and we'd like yours to do the first. And I said, what's that when it's not at home? Because we don't in America call a little book of poems, usually in a paper or a soft wrapping. We don't call it a pamphlet. We call that a chapbook. They used to be sold on the streets by chapmen. And so once I realized what it was you were talking about, I said, yes, please. And then I started going through a lot of my poems to see what would work together. I think one of the things that happens when you put together a book of poems is you have to have an arc in it. The way in a novel, you have to have a plot and a plot line. You have to have a kind of arc in it. And that's what I try to do. So I'm going to read just a few of the poems, and you won't hear the arc because I'm not going to read all of the poems. But I want to start with this one. It's called Light. Light. A word, but not a word. Sound, but not sound. A puff of air, a hiss of breath, a shift of molecules before there were molecules. A star born before it has a name, a garden planted with nouns, green, not yet a color, and yet surely a color pushing up through what will one day be called ground zero. Something is born from the earth, from the star, vaguely man-like, woman-like, but a surer touch this time, alike and not alike. Something flies above their heads. Bird, the man figure says. Hawk, the woman figure says. An argument from the beginning. So it's one of the things I like to do is to take stuff that is scientific and wrap it around with stuff from fairy tales and folk tales and biblical references and midrash and all sorts of stuff. You may have noticed in the first poem that was read with the music behind it, there was a reference to Donald Trump there, which I didn't call him Donald Trump. I just mentioned what the kind of person was who might have annoyed the knight, the kind of king that he didn't like. So this next poem is one that was published in Scotland, and it's called "Can Sci-Fi Save Us?" I have to tell you that I use the term sci-fi. Nobody in science fiction really loves the term sci-fi unless they come out of the television or the movies. We think of it as science fiction or SF or SFNL. So I use that very particularly here. Can sci-fi save us? No more than a single politician or the signing of a solitary bill. No more than a march of 1,000, a million, or the rise of a green sunburst. No more than a man in a gray suit holding a placard outside Parliament, or a dozen protesters inside. No more than a woman mowed down by a Nazi on a soft morning, nor a dozen children, school children slaughtered at their desks. But a single story told enough times, warmed in the mouths of 1,000 tellers, resurrected from a cross of Martian timber, plowed into the dirt of 1,000,000 stars, might make a difference, perhaps, long after we're gone, and our paper with us. There will be alien visitors who, in a language different from ours, will coin a new word for sci-fi and create tales that will erase all our planetary scars, setting the heavens alight again. So when people ask me what I do, I say I'm a storyteller. I don't say I'm a writer. I don't say I'm a published author. I don't say I make books. I say I'm a storyteller. The other word for storyteller is liar. I tell lies to get to the truth, it's easy to tell lies. It's harder to tell lies that tell the truth. Emily Dickinson, who's one of my favorite poets ever, wrote, "Tell all the truth, but tell it slant. Success in circuit lies." I love the way she used the word lies there. So here's another poem of mine, That Rocky Ride. It comes from something that David L. Harrison said: "The earth is the only rock we have to ride." Earth is the only rock we have to ride now, its heft and hurtle through the universe, the only poem we know. But our children's children will hitch their rides to different rocks, sing other odes, rope further stars. They will ride into verses, make poems we cannot imagine, speak metaphors in mouths unlike our own. Now, sometimes I send out poems a lot to journals, and I would say that for every poem that I get taken by a journal or a magazine, I probably get about 10 rejected. But sometimes even more, sometimes a poem that has been rejected, that I keep wanting it to go somewhere, finds its way into a book of mine. And that's what this next poem did. It's called God's Carton. Egg cradle the shell, held in angel arms, a singularity waiting to become a world. No big bang here, but the gentle opening onto the fry pan of the universe. The only question, will it be a watery Earth, dry Mars, or your basic, everyday, galactic scramble? So you wait long enough when you're a writer, and maybe something happens. Now I have a Mars poem. I've gotten so that I'm fascinated by Mars, by the exploration, what we see, what we don't see, what we guess, what we figure out, we don't know yet. Maybe we will know sometimes. And this one is called Mars Rover Curiosity. It tracks across the landscape, one soul after another. It may know day from night, may know the planet has 668 souls, but in stubborn obeisance to its own makers, it marks all its anniversaries in Earth time. I am of that same curious metal, plodding place to place. The sun, the moon are flags I recognize, but planted in my own known Earth, I count my hours by those remembered chimes that ring out the time in my own hometown. And another exploring poem. It's called Ode to Cassini. There is nothing now but echo, faint beeps, like a dying heart. He can feel the breath of doctors at his bedside, family weeping. The light, he thinks. The angel in charge of good machinery gathers him into planetary arms, faithful to the end. He sends his final discoveries home. It's also, if you think about it, a sort of description of a dying poet or a dying writer of stories or dying storyteller. Is you're lying there and you're gathered up, faithful to the end. You send out your stories, your poems, the things that you've thought about. You send them home, the discoveries home. So in a sense, for me, that's kind of valedictory of who I am, as well as who Cassini was. This one started with something that a friend of mine sent to me, a line that she sent to me. Sometimes she does that, and then I go and take off and write a poem from it. But it ended up published in Asimov's. It's called Nice Touch. Now, Teresa Matlock is my friend, and she sent me this line: "The plastic bags in the ocean are a nice touch." You could write many poems using that same one. Russell, I challenge you to write a poem with that same thing. This is my poem. The aliens see the blue planet from afar. Come down for a closer look. They are comfortable with the long green corpses of golf courses, conversant with iron cranes pumping out life-giving oil. They recognize the bones of mammoth trash mountains, dumps of old machines, batteries, wires. Even the children searching the ruins are familiar. The aliens turn to their hosts, those few remaining men and their frightened women in faded aprons. The plastic bags in the ocean are a nice touch, they say, before flying off in their golden ships. We'll take the whole thing. Funny place to end when I was given the oceans, the plastic bags in the oceans are a nice touch. I always love to find where I'm going. I don't always know where it is till I'm there. Now I'm going to read to you the last poems in the book. It's a suite. It's called the Robot Suite. And I think it's 5 poems. Is it 5 poems? Anyway, it starts with Robot Dreams. In the machine shop, the robot dreams, I am the gray traveler, the fetus of God. Someday I will be a monument. Who can calculate dreams or the meaning of dreams? Freud tried, and Jung, hanging their analytics on the coat hook of a century full of nightmares. The robot was shoved onto the conveyor belt, from there to a delivery truck where he thought he had arrived on the only route to God, side by side with the gray beauty of his surprising peers. And the second poem, robot poem, is called Robot Love. It begins with a spark, short, bright, lightning in the command center. There is a shock of movement. Steel lips link, lock, a pop as one lip splits. They fall to the floor, long limbs clanging, try to find a purchase. For a moment, they mimic a thrust, hard breathing. One cries out in ecstatic code. Finally, there is a second spark, a grinding noise, metal on metal, intermittent. I don't normally write such graphic sex. The third one is called Robot Baby. Birthed in the body shop, polished by the nurse, he rests in your arm without movement or thought until you speak. Its name brings life. Excalibur, though you will always call it Callie. It creaks awake. The manual instructs change its oil every few hours. Free oil can attached. Use diaper for leaks. It will never grow old, only rust if you leave it out too long in the rain. It won't smoke dope, get depressed, talk back. It will care for you in your old age. And then the final poem, the next to final poem, sorry. It's called The Last Robot, which is the title of the book. The last robot on Earth sank sullen in farmyard muck, half buried in the pigsty. Even the boars for their final meal turned their backs on its rusting parts. Some creatures are a mystery, some a misery, but robots were the perfect immigrants, ready to work for nothing but a bit of borrowed energy. They lay as they lived, outsiders even indoors, unacknowledged laborers, motives mistrusted, useful until used up. Lynched by history, rotting by roadsides, hated by fellow workers and owners alike, they never truly died, just cluttered the landscape with their irony and their iron bones, a testament to their steadiness and the world's bigotry. I think that's it. I think there were just 4 because I printed out an extra one. So there you have it. So a storyteller in poetry. You can see a lot of my issues there. Yes, I have children. I have 3 children, all of whom are writers. And they should have gone following their father's footsteps. He was a computer scientist. And I'll tell you, being a writer, being a poet, writing for children and writing for adults has been an honor, a pleasure, constantly amusing, constantly surprising, especially when people tell me what they think my stories and poems are about. So, Russell, I turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Jane.
You have something funny to tell us?
I don't have any more robot jokes. I could try and think of one while we're going if you want. But it's always nice to hear you, of course. And as I said before we came online with everybody, hopefully we'll be seeing you again in Scotland. But I do have a few questions or things that we could just chat about. And whilst I'm doing that, I'm going to ask that any audience members, again, if you have a question you'd like to ask Jane, you can either type it into the chat or you can wave at us towards the end when I ask you. So please do get thinking. So Jane, first I was going to say happy birthday, of course. 82. I don't know if it's okay to keep repeating that. I was thinking at the moment, life kind of feels a bit science fiction-y. You know, we've all seen things about apocalypses and plagues and so on. But how are things going for you right now?
Well, it was one of those rush to find some place to get vaccinated. Even in my 80s, you know, they were going, no, you don't know, you're not showing any signs. Go away, go away. My daughter, my oldest child, who lives next door, made it her vigorous job to find some place for me to get vaccinated. I think she was about ready to take up a sword and go after people. But she did find some place for me to get vaccinated. And of course, the day after I had that vaccination, my doctor called and said, "Oh, we have vaccinations. We would like you to come." And I said, "Sorry, I've already done it." So it was a science fiction story, you know, and we are kind of living in that world. I've been writing poems about viruses, and I've been writing poems about wearing the plague masks that the old doctors in the plague days wore, the ones that looked like ravens, and I think that we're all consumed by this. Here in America, we're also consumed by politics, and if I couldn't write about them, I think that I would go crazy. It's wonderful to have that outlet to talk about and to rage and put my rage into that, my rage and my desire to, you know, get babies out of cages, and my desire to get people into safe houses and people into safe places. And I'm not going to stand on, I used to stand on vigil lines and go in marches, and I don't do that anymore. At 82, I'm a little retired from that. But to not be able to say something would be terrible, and to not be able to say it to someone else to be able to use poems, metaphor, science fictional stuff, to say things to children coached in children's books that will tell them the truth while it's telling them a story has been life-saving for me, and possibly meaningful for other people.
I think it must be right. As writers, we need that outlet to be able to communicate, and hopefully the technology as well, that even this tech that we're using right now is helping us to do that. As weird as it kind of is to constantly talk to people on screens as opposed to in person.
Well, you know, I used to do a lot of school visits, and I love doing school visits. And school visits, you write up with the children. But I also love to do readings, as you know, and go to science fiction conventions and other kinds of conventions, because I'm a toucher. I like to touch people. I like to hug people. I like to get up close with them and watch their faces as they're talking back to me. And I can't touch anyone there on the screen. You know, and speaking to children on screens is not satisfying. But it's better than not talking to them at all. So in some ways, I'm blessing the technology, but hating it.
I mean, yeah, I think there's a lot of feelings of that, and I'm sure that comes through in the poems and things that you're writing too. Yeah. But one thing I noticed about the poems in The Last Robot, a lot of them do ask kind of big questions, but some of kind of my favorites were those kind of very personal ones where you sort of talk about motherhood or death and loss and love. Do you think there's anything particularly in SF that took you in those directions, the kind of more personal, emotional directions?
It's not just SF, it is SF and fantasy that's done it, because we talk, when we do science fiction, when we do fantasy, when we do science fantasy, when we do SFNL stuff, we are talking in metaphors, which is what poetry does. We are couching this as that. We are saying this is terrible, but this is, you know, this is a beautiful rose. Watch out for the bug inside. It can kill you. We're doing what Emily Dickinson says. We're telling it on the slant, and that gives us more room to maneuver. It gives us more room to be as angry and yet as reconciling at the same time as we can be. We can tell children truths that they will understand even more as time goes by. One of my favorite books as a child was a book called Ferdinand by Munro Leaf. It was a picture book. And this was the middle of World War II. And it was about a bull bred to be a bull in the fighting rings who refuses to fight. And when I look back on that as the metaphor that I took to myself as I was growing up, was to become someone who was against war, against bullies, against killing things, against that became who I became from that book. It goes back to that. And I think that it's the same thing with the poems and the stories that we tell not only to children, but to adults, that they take in and it becomes who they are. I mean, I cannot, during this time that our world is going through, not think over and over again about what rough beast, it's our come round at last, slouches towards Bethlehem to be born. That's pure metaphor. And that's pure metaphor that's also bringing you into the idea of the Messiah being born in Bethlehem, and it's taking you to the beast is the beast, the devil, you know, all of those things. But it's also two of the greatest lines in English poetry.
I think that's really sorry. So I enjoy all of that, how we could absorb metaphor and take it into ourselves, I think is a great way of describing it. I remember Marianne Baruch, I don't know if you know of her work, she's an American poet, described metaphor as a kind of processing mechanism, but also a distancing mechanism, a way of sort of being able to process difficult things. Because it puts a distance between us and the thing. So rather than saying, oh, that person has died, we say they have passed, they've gone to sleep, those sorts of things. So it kind of does both of those things at the same time, kind of allows us to process and distance.
Sometimes they don't work. I remember when my first husband died and people said to me, I'm sorry for your loss. And I think to myself, I haven't lost him. He's still here. It's not like a glove that I've lost, a ring that I've lost. It's not like piece of paper that had somebody's number on it that I've lost. Lost was the wrong metaphor. It didn't work. But sometimes it might work for someone else. Heaven as a metaphor might work for someone else, doesn't work for me. But slouching towards Bethlehem to be born works entirely for me because I see it happening. When I see those people moving into the Capitol building with something that says Camp Auschwitz. I've written 3 Holocaust novels. Don't Camp Auschwitz me. You know, I take that very personally. If I see them marching in a slouch carrying weapons, I think slouching towards Bethlehem to be born. It is very real, in a real sense, very real to me. And I think that we all have, as you say, I mean, somebody talking about they've passed. That's a very real metaphor for someone. If it helps them, fine. We're still saying they died, but I can use that word in other ways. The sentence or the fragment of the line, slouching towards Bethlehem to be born, is to me, or tell all the truth, but tell it slants. Those are life words for me entirely. And everybody has different things. You know, some people have, you know, happy birthday, maybe a life thing to you. To me, it just means, oh, you know, another day gone, big birthday passed.
Yeah. Well, yeah, as you say, like, I guess some of those sayings or sometimes cliches, they can help some people, and for some they don't work. But on some of what you were saying there, some of your poems kind of deal with the sense of a doomed earth, or potentially the ability to save the earth. So what are your hopes for the future, or do you think that we are doomed?
I don't know. I have children and grandchildren. I don't want the earth to be doomed. I hope that I feel guilty about leaving them an earth that is in trouble. I feel confidence in that my children and grandchildren are smart enough and strong enough to work towards fixing it in ways that my generation has not. And that's all I can do.
Well, I think you've done a lot towards that. You know, 400 books. No one's going to say you sat there and did nothing.
A lot of trees died for me.
That's true. Yeah. What's your carbon footprint, Jane? But no, the way that you've, through your books, been able to impact on so many people is certainly going to have ripples. And I wish I could ask you lots and lots more things, to be honest, even about your cookbooks. You know, I cook all the time, and I wish we could talk about that. But I think I need to begin to open it up to other people. So before we ask the audience, I'm just going to ask Noel to play another of Jane's video poems.
There is, he thinks, no magic to match this. Moonrise, stars, the endless, fathomless dark behind them, which, upon the turn of God's own wheel, becomes morning. The apprentices approve of the hand's quick sleight, the solemn words of power, the slippage of the known, those mass hallucinations they call the great magics, and practice every day. They understand nothing. Gazing out the window, Merlin knows that green growing without encouragement holds more magic in a blade of grass than resides in his wand. Knows the true mysteries begin each dawn in a chorus of incantations so complex and changing that they are more wonder-filled than anything he can devise. but it cannot tell the apprentices that. Let them learn the old words, let them wave their wands about, let them make calculations. Let them spend their youth trying to spin straw into gold. They will find out in time where true power resides. In grass, moon, space, egg, bird song, and the child, knowing its time has come, bursting early from the womb, swimming upwards, outwards, towards the eager light.
I love Elizabeth's drawings. I love them. And the cello is oddly telling its own story that parallels what's going on in the poem. And probably you can guess from that poem that my family and I are bird watchers. And walking out of a morning in New England and listening to the birds and watching them and seeing things move about in the grass and under the soil even is so much magic that people miss in our hurry to get through the world to our next step. So I hope that poems, maybe poems of mine, poems of other people, stories can slow us down, make us be grateful for what we have before it's lost.
I think that's something that maybe some people in the pandemic are starting to realize a little more when you're confined to a smaller space, you start to have to look at that space in more detail, which is kind of what poetry makes you do too, right?
Yep. The other thing is, when I teach writing, I say to my students, we take a walk outside, and I say to them, if you cannot walk outside and come back with 5 new ideas for stories, for books, you're not working. You're not working. And then I say, over there, oh look, there's a pebble on top of something. Something or someone has put that pebble up there. It didn't grow there. It wasn't. Maybe it was a bird. Maybe it was a squirrel who thought it was an acorn. Maybe there was a wind that carried it there. And before you know it, we're coming up with ideas from things that we see as we're walking along, that we might not have seen were we walking past, but we're walking along and paying attention. And I think what writers do, what artists do, is say, slow down, pay attention. There's so much there that we miss. I certainly hope that that's what my stories and poems do. Certainly other people's stories and poems do that for me. They say, you missed this. Maybe you hadn't thought about this. And that's what conversations do too, good conversations. And that's what walks with by yourself, with a dog, with a friend, socially distanced, very masked, can still do.
Yeah, absolutely. So we do have a couple of questions that have popped up on the chat here. So I'll go with the first one, which is from Andrew J. Wilson. Jane, do you find that your poetry and your dreams influence each other?
I have 3 kinds of dreams. Some I actually write a story or a poem in. I don't always remember them. I remember that I had done something. The second kind of dream is just an ordinary dream. Naked before, running to school naked because you forgot that you had a test, that kind of dream. The third that has been started since I've gotten older, and maybe a little panicky about writing everything down before I pass. I have been at night reading in sleep. I'm reading other people's poems that I'm making up, actually, people's reviews of my books, stories about me or about people I know that have not happened. It's as if I'm reading newspapers, and I'm literally reading them. And at some point, I'm seeing the words going along as if it's a ticker tape, except they're invented as I'm reading them. And I wake up and I go, no, wait, that's not true, because I'm reading it in the dream. It's not something I'm remembering. And those three things, I think, are looking at very deeper things in myself. One is that layer of I'm writing, I need to write more. One is all the old things that used to bother me. Am I doing well in school? Have I missed a test? Does anybody like me? That sort of thing. And then the other one is I'm so curious about the world. I'm so curious about what's going to happen next, which is, I think, a sign of somebody who's going to be a writer or a scientist. I'm so curious all the time that I'm inventing things to be curious about. And, that's all. I'm obsessed by these dreams in these newspapers and things that I'm reading in my dreams.
Sounds like that writer's impulse, right? To create stories and to create alternatives that's kind of just flooding through you.
Yeah.
And we'll end, I think, with the question from the chat from Simon Malpass, which is, I'm interested in the similarities or differences between writing for children and adults. When you write for children, are you telling the different truths, or are they the same truths told differently? Are they different slanted lies, or the same lie with a different slant?
I just tell a story. And sometimes I go, oh, this is not a story I want small children to read. Or this is a story I want small children to read. Maybe when I began my career, I was saying, this is a children's book and it has to have smaller words. Now I don't do that. I even write easy readers now, and I use big words, because I think it's the story that carries along for the child. I remember my son Adam, who was he's now a science fiction fantasy writer, but he was reading at 2.5. So he was reading always above his level. And at one point, he had read Anne McCaffrey's Harper Hall books, which were the children's series from the Pern books. And then he said, are there more of these? And I said, well, they're adult books. And he said, can I read them? And I said, I'm sure you can read them. But I was a little worried because in the Harper Hall books, he was probably about 10, 11 at the time, maybe 12. But when the dragons were mating, their human partners would mate. Didn't matter who the dragons were. The dragons would just go off with any dragon, I guess. And the human partners were emotionally forced to respond because they were so tied to their dragons that they would mate too. And I'm going, I don't know if I really want him to see this. So then I said, well, okay, but we need to talk about the books afterwards. He said, okay. So we ran through it. He read them. He came back and he said, okay, you want to talk about it? And I said, sure. And I said, how did you feel about the sex parts? And he said, what sex parts? Because he wasn't interested. That was not interesting to him at 10, 11. Maybe if he had been 14, but no. I said, oh, when the dragons mated. He said, oh, nah, yeah, right. But a few years later, I took him to his first science fiction convention. My daughter and my younger son were not interested, but Adam was. So we went. I think it was BosCon, which is in Boston. And as we're getting up to go out to have dinner with a bunch of writers, many of whom he had read, there's a woman standing there in costume on the side. She's not a writer. She's not coming out with us, but she's one of the costumers. And she's wearing a long mermaid tail, and she's naked from the body up, from the waist up, but is covered with blue-green body paint. And I'm going, I'm a bad mother. I am a terrible mother. But because she's right there. She's practically right in my kid's face. I'm going, oh my God, what have I done? What have I done? And we go back, we go out to dinner, and he's talking to all these writers, and then he's in awe of them. And he never says anything about the woman that he saw half naked. And I'm going, all right. And we get back home, and he runs up ahead of me. And I hear him on the phone, where I go to my room, he goes to his, and I hear him on the phone, and he says, yeah, he says, and a tail and blue body paint. And that was all. I go, oh God, he did see it. He did see it. He just didn't want me to know that he had seen it. He was talking to a friend, a guy friend. So, they take what they want from it. they see what they need from it at the time that they read it. My parents always let me read anything in their library. So I read books, half of which I didn't understand. Like Joseph in Egypt, which I read, these huge bound volumes of. Much of it I didn't understand at all, but the language was beautiful. So he read Anne McCaffrey that way. So when I write the story that needs to be told, and then I let an editor tell me, oh, this is a children's book, or this is an adult book.
Thanks, Jay. I think that's a really great lesson to learn, actually, that people will take what they need from something, and that's very worthwhile in itself. But unfortunately, we have to draw the evening to an end. So I'd just like to say, please buy the book. There is a link in the chat here. So if you've enjoyed what you've heard tonight, please do check it out. And there's lots and lots of stuff on the Shoreline website if you're interested. This will also be available to rewatch. If anyone wants to share it with other people, we're going to upload it so you can watch it again and hear Jane's stories again. But other than that, I just have to say thank you to Shoreline Infinity particularly to Noel for helping to both put the book together and with the tech and the support tonight. So I edited it, but with Jane and Noel did all of the fiddly stuff of putting things on the page and making sure it looked pretty and all of that kind of thing. So thanks to Shoreline. Also thanks to everyone who came tonight or in the daytime, if that's where you are. It's great to see you all. And of course, finally, thank you to Jane for not only writing the book, but for giving us her time tonight or today and sharing her thoughts and her stories with us. So thanks to all of those people.
You made my birthday. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you. And thanks to Russell, too, for all your work there. He did do some work on the book. He did do some work. He made sure the full stops were in the right place. A very important job, too. Okay, so we'll say thank you, everybody, and good night. And make sure you head for ShoreLineInfinity.com to find out more about us, and particularly to pick up a copy of Jane's pamphlet or chapbook, depending on where you are. So thank you. Good night. Safe home. Hi, Andrew. You may speak. Let me just turn off all the recordings and the streamings. So.